Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Dojinshi, and welcome back to another episode of Hentai Reviews, a series where we're going to be continuing to do what we normally do, but we're going to be taking a step into a different direction due to a certain recommendation. Now, you're probably wondering why I decided to move over to an actual manhwa rather than, the typical sort of videos that I normally do. You see, the reason for that is a quite existentially long and tedious series of events that have all come together to conformedly say, somebody recommended it to me, so I decided to be a little bit of a nice guy and read it all within one day. I'll have you know that webcomics, aka manhwas, in this series are insanely easy to read through on your phone. I seriously read 8 chapters before I got out of bed. That being said, I also then did the rest of it all on my computer, which then took me about 15 minutes to get through the rest of it, all 14 chapters of it. So, if you don't think you have spare time, trust me, it exists. Yes, today we are going to be talking about the actual author of this series itself. Well, you see, the 14 chapters is done by a little-known author who, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I was even aware, because I've done maybe not the most research, but as far as I could find, has only done this singular series. That being said, this series itself is done by the author Kim Mundo. Or at least that's how I'm pronouncing it. I am not 100% sure how Korean authors' names are placed, because I barely have a hold of Japanese ones, so that does sound the way that it does. That being said, Kim Mundo has made the series that we are currently reviewing today. She is working out. Now, if you're wondering for the whole thing that's going on in this video, why are we really here? What is the essential meaning of this whole thing? Well, you see, the author created this story for its actual reasoning, the plot, if you will. Not the plot, the plot. And if you're wondering what it is, well, let me go ahead and explain that. You see, the plot of this whole thing revolves around the main character, I'll get into the names of each character in just a moment, is essentially coming back from a long time and joining into this dojo that he has essentially been grandfathered into thanks to its previous owner no longer being around, and the only person that was around nowadays was the daughter, or the person that was in charge. And essentially it's leading to him being excited and being back with her because he was essentially just a huge simp for her. He thought she was the bee's knees and decided he needed to be around her. And you know what he did? He decided to come back and make sure that it's there. But unfortunately, if you ever noticed, some kids don't exactly stay around for the black belt and most sorts of things, so he goes back to run this dojo, but there seems to be some money problems, and a few different people all around that he needs to get his hands on, or at least so he can build up the courage to be able to ask out the girl he really likes, who unfortunately sees him as the little brother. And that's where this series picks up. As of now, there has been 14 episodes, or at least not episodes really, 14 chapters, to which case it is slowly building off of. Well, as you can clearly see, there also happens to be a few characters in this that we're going to get into as of now. You see, there's really only about 4 main characters that are being really presented in this series. There is the main character. I believe the name is pronounced Seok. It is Seok. I'm not very good with Japanese pronunciations, so Korean is probably not going to be my best. That being said, he's the main character, so to say, the guy who is now taking over this whole business that his friend's father has left him due to his higher experience than most other folks. And then let's go ahead and move on to the mentor of the whole thing. She is at least referred to by the main character as Nuna. She's essentially the character that was his childhood crush as he was a child, and has grown now into the more experienced but also like aloof. She's very less involved, as I can say, and I would personally say she's one of those characters that you're hoping for, because I feel like that's what the author is also there for. You kind of hope for this relationship to just kind of go up further. but it's not the main one you're focusing on. Then there is the childhood friend, who at least is referred to by the name, I'm gonna butcher this probably, Jungbin. Jungbin was at least referred to when they were childhood friends. Seok thought that she was a boy because she had such a boyish figure, no real definable features that made her a girl, until she's an adult now and she also works alongside him in the, she's kind of more experienced than him, and there's also kind of this pseudo relationship that you also feel like is forming between these two, because there's a lot of physical contact between them, and they both see each other as incredibly attractive, and they may have feelings for each other, but it's a little iffy. Iffy due to the fact that there is a third woman that has actually shown up that is essentially the new girl on campus. Not necessarily they're on a campus, but the new girl to show up goes by the name of Hyung-si, or at least that's how I'm pronouncing it because that's how I read it. Hyung-si is essentially a piano tutor who then ended up meeting Seok after a little bit of time and kind of thought that he was cute, so she took a free lesson from him. And then during that, they ended up hooking up, and they're kind of going back and forth. At least they've been together twice as of the 14th chapter being released. I'm not sure from that point on. That being said, those are really the four main characters. The only other possible one would be the father that owned the dojo prior, but his very few interruptions really don't take much. So that's all the main characters.
Well, if you are a bit savvy in the ways that we do these things, we are very focused in one particular way of moving around. That being said, artwork is the main thing that we're going to be using to move around, specifically for the fact that this is an incredibly well done sense of artwork. You see, the flow of a lot of things works a lot better when it comes from a, how can we put it, a specific type of e-comic, so to say. The art in this flows really well because it's meant to, because it's being used in a specific way. That specific way particularly coming from these sorts of things. I gotta cut that out. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, go. You see, the art itself from this comes from a very flowy way, so to say. You see, the pretty much the artwork itself comes from these webtoons of how they're normally meant to be viewed, flowing through it on a phone as if you were pretty much just going in one straight line the whole time. No flipping from pages, no seeing how it moves side to side. It's all very much downward. And just the flow of the art itself is amazing because sometimes it can induce quietness by using the amounts of time that it goes between pages. That being said, the art of itself is very heavy, it's very reflective. It almost feels like it's adding a thickness itself to the artwork, and I can safely say that it makes a lot of these characters so much more attractive because the art in it is specifically meant around certain curves that make things a lot more palatable when it comes to these sorts of things. That being said, the art itself is what I would like to consider higher tier, specifically because, well, artwork itself and the animation style usually differ quite a lot. Reasoning why people will say that anything that's made by Kentaro Miura, being the author of Berserk, is way, way, way better than any sort of animation to it, because the animation just can't copy that level of detail. That being said, the art in this, since there is no animated version of it, is superb, I feel, on my own standards, because animation doesn't really come through a lot when it comes to the pretty art style. So I can say 100% certain that the art, thick, shiny, oily, and oh, is it sexy. And now, on to something that we can really go for, the actual story of the whole thing.
Where the fuck have you been? You see, when it comes to the real story of this whole thing, it's actually
quite a wholesome one, because the story itself is kind of based around, the basic getting back to who you are as a person. Getting back to the things that made your life simple. Your simpler crushes, your simpler days where you're just learning to, come out with yourself. To be really just open. How sweet and how nice it can be to just go back to the nostalgia of old friends, old girlfriends, old everything. Just an understanding of everything that's going on and how kind everyone can be. Now, the story itself takes place over, pretty much over about 2 months, at least so far as it is, the 14 chapters that exist as of making this video. You see, the series itself isn't very long. You can probably binge it all in maybe 2 hours of just sitting still. I know a lot of people don't want to have their hand down their pants for 2 hours, but if you have commitment, then you have commitment. Don't really look at it look at the story as something that is cute, bubbly, and just fun. It is adorable because there are characters that just want to be with other characters. A guy who has clearly not been laid a lot, who just comes back and he sees this beautiful girl that he's always wanted to be with. But then the thing that surrounds him most is pretty much every other girl. And he's also kind of going along with them as well. He just wants the sweetness of being around other people. But he ends up getting laid, which can't really say that's a negative. That being said, we should probably get into our next topic, the, how can I say, plot. You see, the plot itself does not necessarily waver in any way, shape, or form when it comes to its presentation. It is by very much the definition vanilla, but unfortunately for it, it doesn't do vanilla any necessarily sense of generic. Now, when I say unfortunately, I don't mean unfortunately. I mean that this is pure vanilla. This is a wholesome relationship between people who don't feel like they're hooking up. It feels like they're developing a relationship almost. This is vanilla done correctly, I'd like to say, where it feels like you're building a relationship rather than you're just going at it. Because vanilla is supposed to feel comforting, friendly. And it does waver on certain portions of it, but it wavers about as much as the character who's trying to hide the fact that they're getting laid, actually getting laid, really. So necessarily, this isn't anything new, but it is well framed, and the vanilla is probably the best vanilla that you can get, at least the most pure. Something that you could easily spend $10 on when it came to, the packaging, because it came so well. Vanilla, but pure. Now let's go ahead and get into the ending, will we? Now for the ending of the series itself, I can't necessarily say this is the end, but I can necessarily say that this is a decent point in it for it to stop. I would 100% sit here and actually wait for the next chapter, the next page. I honestly wait for pages for a lot more on a lot slower of a scale. This happens to be one of the better ones. I can't necessarily say this is the greatest when it comes to jumping into things, because as I am very well aware that a lot of people on here think, a lot of you think you are men and women of culture, or whatever you decide to identify on, but have you truly sunk into the culture itself? You're able to figure out what true culture is the second you see something that does not live up to the standards. That being said, that does not mean you should be picky, but that does mean that you know when something is a 7 out of 10. Where this stands right now, these are really decently done characters in a scenario that could easily lead to more character development, and it could also lead to more in just the general sense of the term. There is a lot more that can be done, and there's a lot more that I really hope gets done, because this is well done. This is a solid 7 out of 10, 8 in fact if I decide to give it more on a better day. That being said, I look forward to the next chapter, I look forward to the next page, I look forward to the next rough sketch. This is an amazing starting point for anybody who wants to look into the NSFW side of Manhwa, and I would solemnly recommend it.
That being said, I'm probably going to end up falling into the same pit that I did with the rest. Eventually becoming bored of vanilla, and then falling into what I like to call the Dark Eldar hole, which, if any of you are Warhammer nuts, you would probably know the Dark Eldar hole is not some place you go. But unfortunately, a job is a job, and a dirty job is a dirty job. And I'm not Mike Rowe, but I'm going to see you guys later. So, let's go ahead and end it there. Thank everybody for being here. I have been the Doctor. No matter how unprofessional I look, I'm still the Doctor. That being said, let's go ahead and just move on. Remember, have a nice day, don't be a dick, there's too many of them, and wash your fucking hands. I've been the Doctor. Peace.